all I got to say about tonight's game is where the hell was that explosiveness all season long? Uh, Tim Aiden, Diaries.com, joined once again by Lando, who, we're bringing it off the bench because Patrick Kerbler is away for the weekend at a friend's wedding reception. So, Lando, how about that? How about that blanking of Sparty, keeping the land grant trophy in Happy Valley for another year? Or I guess I don't know if he plays Sparty next year, but we're going to keep it for at least another year.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the explosiveness was nice to see. Several long pass plays, a couple nice runs. But you do have to remember they were playing Michigan State team that's pretty deficient in a lot of areas. So there definitely has more than one grain of salt. You have to take that performance. And of course, there's lots of chatter about, well, of course, the game that, it's post Yursich is when Penn State opens up the playbook or gets more explosive plays. But I think that's a little or what was it, correlation without causation, or I'm not a math person, so
well,
I don't.
I will say this, Lando. I mean, I don't remember the offense being this explosive, even against UMass or Delaware or Indiana. I mean, it's not like Michigan State's the worst team on the schedule here. And they were
Right.
showing they were still showing some fights. They had won 2 of their last 3. Now, granted, they beat Indiana and Nebraska, not exactly, murderer's row, but for a team that, really had been in turmoil for almost the entire season when Mel Tucker got fired. They were still, they were still kind of, fighting for the program and for their interim coach, Harlan Barnett. And so it wasn't a team that had just simply laid down and quit. So for Penn State to come out there and utterly destroy them the way they did, and pitch their third shutout of the season, it was still pretty impressive in my book. I'd say most impressive performance of the offense since maybe the West Virginia game. I mean, I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed. I mean, seeing the run game, seeing Katron Allen bust off that huge game, which looks like it was a 50-yarder on like the first try. I mean, that was just refreshing to see. And then also they hit Nick Singleton for a long 50+ yard screen pass at one point. And Drew Hour hits Omari Evans for a 60-yard bomb, which came up just short of the end zone, but set up a touchdown. And, Drew was slinging it over all around the yard, had almost 300 yards passing, a couple touchdowns. Bobrilla comes in a couple packages. He counts for 2 total touchdowns, one running, one passing. And, and of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the defense. Just absolute domination. 7 sacks in total. You had the interception from Jalen Reed on a promising drive for Michigan State. And, just really great all-around performance from the team. Very, very satisfying to see. And I'll say it at least gives me some confidence going into whatever bowl game ended up being selected in, which we're going to find out next Sunday where they end up. Lando, just what impressed you the most about tonight's game?
Well, I mean, it's really not a whole lot that we haven't already seen when Penn State was at their peak. In terms of like you mentioned the pass rush, I really liked seeing Abdul Carter kind of have a game that we were hoping we would get a lot more of from him. A couple sacks in this game. Unfortunately, he got a little banged up in the second half, and I don't know, how serious the injury was, but certainly given the deficit for Michigan State, I think it made sense why they kept him out just in case. But certainly, I mean, the offensive line did a very nice job protecting Aller the whole game, really. Which I think that was nice after at least after the first drive, because I know he got sacked on the early one of his early drives. But really, I mean, that was a small thing that coming into the season, the offensive line was supposed to be a strength of the team, and they have really faltered in pass protection a lot this year, as well as in the running game too. So really a great game for that offensive line. Uh, I I don't mean to sound like a negative Ned or what have you, but it, I try not to place too much stock in any one singular game, um, good or bad. I think that's something that I know after the Ohio State and Michigan games, really the criticism for Drew Aller, for the offense in general, for all the skill players was pouring in, and likewise after West Virginia, everyone was saying, "Well, this is a playoff team, and it's a playoff level defense." But the consistency is what I would hope for. So it's a shame that this kind of performance happens at the end of the season, so we don't really get a chance to see, going forward how this team will go. But really, offensive line really impressed me. Unfortunately, the receivers didn't do too much outside of that Evans catch, and they didn't really have to do much, which is really, I guess, the point. Great game for the running backs. Again, the kind of effort that we expected the whole season. Really, we got it in the last regular season game. Just uh, overall, really solid performance by every unit, and then some units obviously going above and beyond. That were in the game, the offensive line, and certainly the defense.
Yeah, yeah. I'll say what we're really impressed with the running backs. Katron and Nick went over went over 100 yards. That's the first time all season that's happened. And that's, I mean, it's unfortunate it didn't happen until now, but that's kind of like what we were hoping to see from the beginning throughout. And it was really disappointing when, like they were, I guess, efficient. At least one of them was efficient, but they weren't exactly ripping off any explosive runs. It was kind of more like, you know, get good like 4 to 5, 6 yard chunks, and yeah, maybe finish a drive in the end zone. But you know, what we saw just felt like by a time warp back to last year when Singleton was taking sweeps up a sideline to the house, and I really liked how the Jalen Sider and Ty Howell, the acting offensive coordinators, worked to get Singleton the ball in space. Hit him on screens, on swing passes when he can just make a move, make one cut and take off. And they even worked Allen into the passing a bit. He did have he did have a receiving touchdown in addition to, running all over the place. So, they really did a good job, I think, getting Remax involved. And probably shot to Trey Potts, ripped off a nice 28-yard gain. Unfortunately, it didn't result in any points being scored in that drive, but it was still, just great to see him get some action and, just get a nice play there to pad his stats a little bit. But yeah, you mentioned the receivers didn't do much aside from like Omari Evans catching big pass, and Dante Cephas had 3 catches. Connor Smith had a catch, but it was really the tight ends, Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren. Once again, both of them had a touchdown catch, and were critical in helping them move the chains at times. But it was really, I think, also just like I said, the offensive line. After the first couple drives, they really settled in and did a good job protecting Drew, just giving him plenty of time in the pocket to, find his open receiver. And I don't know if you know, it seemed to me they also, Snyder and Howell were giving Drew some quick, like one read throws for him to make instead of always having him try to scan the field and find a guy. It was kind of good to see that, get him into a rhythm early on. And then from there, you can kind of let him, operate a little more. So, and that's something you didn't really see maybe during the season, like giving him some easy, like one read plays to make, which can, get him to rhythm, up his confidence. And you saw it, like as he started to build confidence, he, eventually just started to let it rip. And, it was just, again, it was just really, really, really just a great thing to see. And I hope whoever they end up hiring as offensive coordinator, um, they'll watch this game tape and they'll see, what you can really get out of this group. Because it's a really skilled group of offensive skill players. And frankly, I don't think you saw it tonight when Mike Yurcich got fired. I mean, again, it's not just, obviously he got fired for the performance against Michigan, Ohio State, but the offense wasn't playing like this against teams in the schedule that I'd argue were worse than Michigan State. So, it was, like I said, just really refreshing thing to see.
Absolutely. It's, like you said, it'll be interesting to see, how this performance, affects the future of the team. It's, um, coming into the last couple of weeks now, people start talking about, does Singleton or Allen, especially Singleton, are they thinking about entering the transfer portal? A game like this might help to keep them, both entrenched in Penn State. I personally didn't really think that was really entered their mind. I mean, I was listening to the television broadcast, and they're talking about how the both running backs have really embraced the idea that they are getting they're splitting kind of the load and touches in during the game, not just for Penn State's offense, but also for the benefit of the both running backs long term in the NFL. Maybe they could avoid a situation where they get 300 carries in college and then they get to the NFL and they burn out after a few years. And I hope that's true. I hope that wasn't just the broadcast team sort of you know spouting out whatever the propaganda that Penn State told them. And I hope it's a genuine feeling because I would love to have both of them back. And as much as I know that everybody has kind of gotten behind the idea that Katron is the number one back, I still really like seeing Singleton when he's at his best and being able to get to the outside and turn the corner. And you saw it a couple times tonight that really haven't seen much of it at all this season.
Right. Singleton especially had been rather disappointing from, just definitely took a step back from last year. Seemed like he was lacking the explosiveness and but I don't know. Maybe part of just also he wasn't being set up in the right way. And it seems like, Sider and Howell did a great job of, getting him to the edge, hitting him on screen, just giving him more, more of the plays where he can actually thrive in. And I hope, I hope, I don't know what he's thinking, obviously. And, I guess I'd say it's a coin flip whether or not he does portal, but, I hope once he takes a step back and especially, I figure we should know maybe by the end of this weekend, or at the very least, maybe by early next week, who the offensive coordinator is going to be, because the transfer portal window opens on December 4th. That's the first Monday of December. So it's coming up. So I think part of the reason why Franklin fired Yurcich a couple weeks ago was to get a head start and to get a guy in place before that portal window opens so they can meet with the offensive players, and convince them that, hey, I can help you guys reach your full potential. And hopefully anyone who is thinking about jumping in has second thoughts and decides to just stick around and not entertain other prospects. So we'll see. But this was, I feel like tonight was a real confidence booster for Singleton especially, and Katron Allen of course too. He's been the real workhorse back, but it seemed like he was really, Sparty's defense seemed to want nothing to do with him after the first couple of carries. It kind of reminded me a bit of watching Tony Hunt against Tennessee in the 2007 Outback Bowl. Like I remember the famous interview of him post game where he's talking about how they didn't seem to be interested in trying to tackle him late in the game. Like it's kind of felt like that watching Katron and Nick just pound the rock on him, like just all throughout the game. And I guess we've talked a lot about the offense. I mean, maybe talk a little about the defense. Just again, another impressive performance. The third shutout pitch this year. I'm trying to remember. I didn't bother trying to look this up before the show, but I can't remember a season where the Penn State pitched 3 shutouts, like in the regular season, and very impressive. I mean, just pitching 1 shutout's impressive in the season, but to do it 3 times, it's especially impressive. But I don't know, the way the defense is playing, they were able to generate a pass rush from the get-go. They were able to mostly hold Michigan State in check. It's not like, I mean, yeah, sure, they did get a few big plays off, which did put them into at least like field goal range territory, but they just weren't consistent enough. Like every time it seemed like they were making progress, they'd shoot themselves in the foot with a untimely penalty, or Penn State's case, they come up with a clutch interception to kill a promising drive. But I feel like even though early on, when we were just dominating on both facets of the game, but the score was like 6-0 second quarter, I still I wasn't concerned. I felt like, ultimately the way the defense was playing, like, I felt like the Sparty defense would eventually start to wilt and tire out, and the offense would just start to pile on the points. And sure enough, that's what happened. But yeah, your impression about the defense, Lando?
I mean, I think it's what most of us expected coming in. Certainly, the pass rush was always going to be a threat in terms of putting pressure on the Michigan State passing game. Um, the secondary, as you mentioned, did get the interception by Jalen Reed, but they didn't really have to do, again, too much because the pass rush wouldn't let Michigan State get out of their own backfield. But, again, I'm not trying to be negative at all. But, the secondary, okay. They're okay. They had a couple, I would say KJ Winston was the other one that really impressed me outside of Jalen Reed. But, you know, maybe I'll say this is to help him make sure he's grounded. Kalen King really, kind of the way he ended the season's just kind of encapsulated his performance for the year for me. Just kind of, I mean, certainly not. I don't think given the hype going into the season as a top 20, top 25 for top 30, first round draft pick potential. He got away with a pass interference call that wasn't called. Especially being a Michigan guy, I'd like to see a little bit more out of him. But certainly the defensive line is always going to be the thing talked about. And I as I mentioned with Abdul Carter, certainly a standout game as well. So that front seven really did their job. Secondary, I'm not hating, but not what I would like to see a little bit more, consistent pass coverage. But can I have everything?
Right. Yeah, it seemed to maybe the pass coverage there were a couple plays that maybe you thought like they would make a play, at least knock it away. But again, maybe I'm being a little nitpicky here because they were able to knock away some passes later on. But I mean, overall though, again, I think D line was just absolutely dominating. Chop Robinson and Disa Isaac, especially, just wrecking havoc. And the linebacking core. I mean, Abdul Carter, he was having himself a game before he left with the injury. Hopefully it's doesn't seem like it's too bad. Maybe, like I said, maybe they were just holding him out because the game was effectively over at the point that he left the game. There's no need to have him keep playing, when he's dealing with that injury, and just let the healing process begin before the bowl game, wherever that ends up being. So, but yeah, linebackers, hell of a game. Secondary was pretty good too. I mean, just maybe a little spoiler work, but my position grades post tomorrow. Yeah, I'd probably give all A's to the defensive positions. So it just another week at the office for Manny Diaz, you could say. And on that note, I really hope. I think they're paying him enough. I just hope that the right head coaching job does not open for Manny, and that he can, he sticks around another year. But we'll see. Because I mean, I'd rather not have to replace both offensive and defensive coordinators in the same season. So if he leaves after next year, then okay, fine. But I'd like to just keep him for one more year if possible. I still think, obviously, we're losing several key guys like Adisa and Chop and Curtis Jacobs, Johnny Dixon, probably Kalen King. I know King has, I think, a year of eligibility left. But you're still returning several guys. You got some, young, freshmen, sophomore ready to, I think, step up and play bigger roles. And of course, you never know. I'm sure especially for cornerback, I'm sure they'll dip into the portal to, get some experienced guys to help fill in the void. So I still think, obviously this is just an amazing group, just a championship caliber group, which sadly was just wasted by an offense that was poorly coordinated and just looked like hot garbage against Michigan and Ohio State. But I guess that's in the past at this point. So, we're moving on to a 12-team playoff next year, and Big Ten landscape changing completely. We don't have to play both. I know we get we get 3 of the incoming Pac-12 teams, but also Michigan goes off the schedule, so it's a bit of a trade-off there. So we'll see. And of course, 10-2. I think next year that would get you in as an at-large into the playoff. Granted, you're probably going to be on the road for the opening round game, but still, just get into the playoffs and let's just see what happens. But getting a little ahead of myself there, but just a great, sort of fine dominant performance from the defense. What do you think about special teams? I know, Falcons, 1 for 2, had that unfortunate doink on his second attempt. But Riley Thompson's solid in the punt game. Gave the Wosu putting kickoffs in the end zone for touchbacks, and Daquan Hardy had a nice punt return late in the game. So I think overall it was pretty solid.
Yeah, the one thing, I mean, you mentioned Hardy had a nice return, and by the way, Hardy also he's done in terms of eligibility too. That's someone that's going to be a bigger loss than I think, at least I thought, going into this season.
That's going to be a big loss,
right? But one small thing I liked about Hardy in this game was he was a lot more aggressive in trying to return punts as opposed to just fair catching. That's something I would have liked to see earlier in the season. So that was nice. You mentioned Falcons. He had a couple field goals. I think it was 2 or 3, and then they had that doink. But he's been probably my biggest pleasant surprise of the year in terms of in that area, because I know going into the season we were concerned about both kicking and punting.
Mhm.
So that's something I think. And you mentioned Thompson. He wasn't needed a whole lot today, and of course Mosu consistently touchbacks. It's special teams really. It's probably been the first season in a while that really no area of special teams has been a concern this year, really, which is kind of amazing because there were a stretch of years for a while at Penn State that whether it was punt returning, punt coverage, kick coverage. I remember in the ending years of the Paterno era, I know the kick coverage was horrendous for several years. But really, special teams really solid this year. And that's something that has been nice to see. That unfortunately, when you had two of the three facets of the game working, that offensive side just couldn't measure up.
Right. But like I said, it was I'm old to remember when in the offseason when special teams were probably one of the bigger question marks because we didn't know who's going to do field goals, who was going to win the punting competition, and then our fears are kind of realized in the first game when Sanderson Haydak misses on a pair of very makeable kicks, like probably like 35-yard kicks. I mean, and then Alex Falcons comes in and stabilizes things. Not just stabilizes things, but he really became money. I mean, he was nailing some long range kicks, and some at times when Penn State really needed to get some points in the board, to get a little momentum or to quash the other team's momentum. So it was great to see that. And of course, Riley Thompson was iffy in the beginning. His punts weren't going very far, but he really cleaned that up nicely over the course of the season and really started booming some good kicks and helped flip field positions. So he became a real asset too. And then of course he had return game. I mean, obviously I think Kaden Saunders was originally returning kicks and mostly fair catching, but then they throw in Daquan Hardy and he his breakout game against State was against UMass when he has those two returns for touchdowns and really kind of became a key weapon in special teams after that. So like I said, it's going to be a bigger loss than maybe some people are thinking, but special teams one of those games that definitely was a pleasant surprise compared to what we were expecting before. So, if the offense was disappointing, I'd say the special teams was equally as pleasant of a surprise. And before we continue on, I just want to just a couple things to note here. Just housekeeping stuff. We got our Discord channel here at the Voice of College Football. You sign up at patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV, talk college football 24/7 with us. And also Diaries.com. That's where Orlando and I write at. We got year-round Penn State sports coverage. Obviously, football is what carries most of our traffic, but we're starting to get into wrestling, basketball, hockey season. They're getting into full swing. And even after football season's over, we'll have signing day coverage for recruiting that's coming up mid-December. And we'll have plenty of off-season football discussion even after things are done. So, between the winter sports and that, check us out. And I've also just want to give a shout out to all of you who are tuning into this. I know not too many of you, especially because who the opponent was. It's Black Friday. You're probably out in the town with your friends or whatever, or maybe you're just asleep if you're on the East Coast. It is midnight here on the East Coast and past Lando and I's bedtime. But I just want to thank you, for tuning in. If you like what you see and you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe for Voice of College Football channel. We'd really appreciate that. And Daniel, just thanks to everyone who's just tuned in and watched this show throughout the course of the season. I realize this is the last one we're doing for the regular season. We'll have one more show after the bowl game. But I guess maybe we'll these last like 10 minutes we can talk about what's ahead. I know the projections, Lando. You do the bowl projections, Watch the Diaries. And it seems like it's mostly coming up peaches. So I would think that's probably where they're going to end up, especially because I don't believe they've ever played in the Peach Bowl, and they played in all the other Near Six bowls. So it makes sense if they finally get number 6 here and play down in Atlanta. Now, question is, who are they going to play?
Well, I know Tulane was a popular pick going into this week. Then the other picks seemed to be outside of the Peach. There were, I think, a couple of writers that might have said Fiesta, but other than Tulane, there was a couple of writers that have picked Alabama as an opponent for multiple weeks in a row. Others that were picking either Washington or Oregon, which all those will be really interesting matchups. It's funny at the beginning of the season when you first started to see the Penn State Alabama picks. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll take Alabama, and now Alabama's kind of start to become their usual self. So it will be really interesting to see. I know coming into this game before kickoff, people were saying the way that Oklahoma was playing against TCU, they were worried about Penn State really had to have a convincing win. Well, no worries about that, because I think there was a little bit of concern about Oklahoma jumping Penn State and then kicking Penn State down to the citrus, but no worries. I don't think that's going to be a concern there. Now it would be interesting if Iowa beat whoever wins the game tomorrow in the Big Ten championship. I don't think there's any chance that will happen, personally. But
no, did you watch the Iowa Nebraska game today? By the way,
I did not.
Man, you missed out on the. I mean, it was. I mean, there's a reason it was the Sickos Committee's game of the week. I mean, it lived up to the hype. Like it was okay. They're tied at 10, and like Nebraska's a ball. It's like a minute ago. We basically think like, all right, either Nebraska is going to get into field goal range potentially, or it's probably going to overtime. But what happens? There's like 23 seconds left. It's like third down for Nebraska. They throw an interception. Iowa returns it like inside the Nebraska 40. The next play, Iowa runs it for like 20 yards. So now they make it like a very makeable field goal for the kicker, and he ultimately ends up putting it through. But it was just it was definitely very Iowa Nebraska type of game. And I think whoever wins the Michigan Ohio State game tomorrow is gonna absolutely wax Iowa in the championship game. And on that note, thank goodness the East and West divisions are going away, so we'll actually get real competitive Big Ten title games going forward. Granted, I don't know how they're going to work out tiebreakers with 18 teams, and the teams playing only half of the other teams in the conference. But that's we'll worry about that this time next year, I guess. But yeah, by the way, we were talking earlier about Nick Singleton, whether he's going to go to the portal. I'm looking at Twitter. Johnny McGonigal. It's a quote from the post-game interview. So Singleton says, quote, I'm committed. I'm committed to the whole team next year. Coach Franklin, Coach Sider, the whole coaching staff. I'm telling you, I'm not leaving. I'm staying here. I'd say it's a pretty emphatic know is if you're wondering whether he's going to portal. I don't think you can get much more clear than that. So that's good to see coming out of Nick.
Yeah, well, it almost seems like you want to insert the Jordan Belfort Wolf of Wall Street gif there.
I'm not leaving. Like
Right. Yeah. Well, that's certainly good to see. Speaking of Singleton and on social media, I don't know if you saw, Tim, that there was some comment that I apologize, I can't remember where it came from initially, but talking about how Singleton was told by Sider when Yurcich was calling plays that he should just kind of take what he can get and kind of take runs up the middle. And now that Sider and Howell are coaching, he's able to kind of free up and get to the outside and get the ball in space, which is where he's the most dangerous. That was really interesting to read.
were we reading this?
On the app formerly known as Twitter.
I still call it Twitter.
On Twitter X. And I apologize, I didn't save the tweet, but let's see if I can backtrack and pull it up. But, yeah, that was
Michigan. Seems like Michigan State is poised to hire Jonathan Smith, the current Oregon State head coach. Or at least he's the front runner. But usually when they say someone's a front runner, that's like, I feel like it's like media speak for, he's going to be the hire. It's just a matter of work, crossing, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, before it's made official. So I think I'd be pretty shocked if they drop the ball on this one. I would expect an announcement probably by the end of this weekend and press conference early next week for that. Assuming that's the case, that's an excellent hire for Michigan State. He's done a tremendous job at his alma mater, Oregon State, where he once quarterbacked them to a New Year's Six bowl win over Notre Dame, and resurrected what was a program that had fallen on some hard times. And it's just unfortunate. I feel like if Oregon State had found a landing spot, either like in the Big Ten or Big 12, ACC, whatever, maybe this hire isn't happening, or it's less likely to happen. But this is the unfortunate circumstance of Oregon State being one of the two teams to get screwed out of the whole Pac-12 dissolving thing. Washington State being the other. But again, this if this holds or if this happens, I mean that's a strong hire for Michigan State, and a necessary one. Just giving how the Big Ten landscape is changing. So let's see how that works out for them. And of course, like I said before, offensive coordinator. Maybe we'll hear something by the end of this weekend, or I would think at the very least we hear sometime early next week who it is. Do you have a preference, Lando? And I don't know if you've been following, like you've seen some names are thrown out, but a couple of them that I've seen. One is Andy Kotelnicki. I think I'm saying correct. He's the Kansas offensive coordinator. Done a tremendous job with Jayhawks under Lance Leipold. He's been by Lance Leipold's side for a long time, previously at Buffalo and at Division III Wisconsin Whitewater. But wherever he's gone, his offenses have been pretty productive. So imagine what he could do with a plethora of talent like he would potentially have at Penn State. Certainly attractive thing. And Colin Klein at Kansas State's another name that seems to be getting a lot of traction, and in part because he and James Franklin go way back to when Franklin was an assistant at Kansas State and recruited him. But Klein is like a K-State institution, played quarterback there, was really good. I think he was in the Heisman talk one year, and now he's been an assistant there for several years. I think his second year as offensive coordinator there, and they've been pretty solid offensively under him. There's a couple of like Lando. Is there anyone in particular that you're hoping they get to, or you're hoping they at least avoid? Or
Well, I mean, this is nothing against Klein as a person, and I'm not as into the offensive coordinator searches. Certainly, Pat Corbler is with his big board or hot board or whatever he calls it.
yeah,
But certainly, watching the way Klein was the quarterback at Kansas State, that doesn't exactly light me on fire in terms of the kind of way he ran the offense. But I get that as the quarterback, you don't have as much control as as you do as the coordinator. So it's I would just have I'd rather have someone who's going to let their playmakers make plays. And I know it's easy to say as
yep,
a armchair quarterback, but that's certainly what I would like. And I did find that the tweet. It is from Onward State Sports Department, so that's there's that caveat. But it said, the tweet says it's certainly worth noting that during the Yurcich era, Singleton said that Sider was coaching him to just take short runs up the middle, and then as soon as Yurcich leaves and Sider takes over some play calling, Singleton starts getting more looks to the outside within ellipses. So I just wanted to source where I was getting my information from. Little conspiracy theory, or kind of filling in blanks there that maybe weren't there in the first place. But because I didn't really see anywhere else where Singleton said that he was basically being coached to kind of take safe runs as opposed to trying for the outside, because it doesn't really fit. But anyway, back to your original question about the offensive coordinator. I don't really have a particular preference. Just a coach that's not afraid to, take chances and kind of trust his personnel.
yeah, agreed on that front. And yeah, I think it's a good way to end this. We've hit the 40-minute mark, and it's past our bedtimes here on the East Coast. And we unfortunately, don't have much viewer engagement tonight in the comments to address. But thank you to those of you who did tune in once again. As I said before, we'll be back. We'll with a post game show for whenever right after the bowl game ends, whenever that is. But Pat, in the meantime, once the bowl game is announced, maybe Patrick and I might hop on Mark Rogers' Big Ten Live show, which airs every Monday between 6 and 10 p.m. Eastern. And on that note, Mark himself also does his weekly call-in show Saturdays at 11:30 Eastern time. So you can check that out tomorrow night as well if you're interested. But for Lando and I, thank you for staying up and watching us, and we'll be back at it one more time this season with our post game for the bowl game. And enjoy the rest of your college football weekend.